My name is Kaimar. As it was mentioned, I was here 2 years ago. I was working for Axelos at that time as the head of product strategy and development. I was looking after ITIL and Prince2 and MSP and some other products. And right now I'm not with Axelos anymore, but Roman is, and Roman has a session tomorrow as well to talk about the future of ITIL. My background is, my career background is mostly in IT. I studied in IT operations, in technical operations, IT support, moved on to software development, then to project management. I was working for a government agency at one point and so on. And then at one point I discovered IT service management, started using IT in my work, and then was headhunted by a Swedish training company to run a training and consultancy company in Estonia to consult people on ITSM and ITIL. I've been also working as a teacher and a trainer for a long time. And at one point I discovered that beer might actually be quite good. It was one of the first trips I made to the US. And you might think that, well, the US beer is not very good, but actually the craft brew scene there is quite strong. So I discovered that beer can actually taste good, and from there it's kind of the rest is history. And tried close to 2,000 beers now, different ones. And I keep trying, so whenever I travel, like last night here as well, with some local beers. And my background is in philosophy, in terms of education, so sometimes when, with my slides and with my topics and the way I write things, it's influenced by my background in philosophy as well. So working in tech, educated in philosophy, and that kind of a weird person. So that was me. The topic will be about scaling DevOps as a concept, as a philosophy across the organization. And with the changes in IT that we have seen in the past decade or so, there has been a lot of science, or I should say science, made available about what works and what doesn't. And it's not really unique to DevOps even, because we have had these recipe type of recommendations for a long time. So if you make these 3 things, or if you take these 7 steps, you are guaranteed to succeed, right? And then the consultancy comes in and then tries to sell you a program of 3 to 5 years to implement all those 7 steps, because with those 7 steps you will succeed for sure. But a lot of that is actually like survivorship bias. So organizations who were successful did those things, but also organizations who died did the same things, right? But it doesn't stop the consultants sometimes to sell these things as solutions. So as an example of a confusion between correlation and causation, which we sometimes see in IT, is this. So it correlates 2 data points, the number of people per year who have drowned by falling into a pool, and then for the same year, the number of films that Nicolas Cage appeared in. So there is a very strong correlation between these 2 data points. The way we see science nowadays very often is to claim that there's a causation here as well. So the science here would be that Nicolas Cage, by appearing in movies, has caused people to drown in pools. Or the other way around, which might actually make some sense, yes. Another example. So people divorcing in Maine in the US, and then per capita consumption of margarine. So the less people consume margarine, the less divorce there will be. So I don't know what the reason is for that, how margarine affects people's marriages, but there's a strong correlation there. So whenever you see stats being presented and causality being claimed that this happened because of that, just kind of make sure it's not something like this. So the link at the bottom of the site, you can create your own data points like this. So it has many data points, you can correlate them between them, and create graphs like this. So yes, lots of stuff out there which claims to be science and which has nothing to do with science. But the problem with having those things is people get fooled into making the same mistakes again, but just under a different name. Right? So this is what kind of feeds the whole silver bullet implementation thing. So nowadays what we have, in the past we saw ITIL implementations, then we saw Agile implementations, now we see DevOps implementations, right? They all fail when you do them as implementations, but we never learn, because we want to find this one thing that works for everything, and then we keep trying and keep trying and keep trying, and then mess everything up. And of course, the sponsor in the organization who fails with implementing something, they leave for a new job. And everybody else stays there and needs to deal with the issues. So yes, science, correlation and causation. So the reason why kind of DevOps has emerged is the role of IT has changed. And the challenges that we have had with IT and with the rest of the business, they have become a big enough problem that we need to really solve it. So kind of when we look at the IT and enterprise, so we have the non-technology departments on the left-hand side, and then the technology departments on the right-hand side. And the problem is that there's usually a wall between them. So this is why we have the concept of IT and the business. You probably have heard this. It might still be used in your organization. So IT and the business. The contact point between these two is very often the service desk. So the users don't interact with IT outside of the service desk. And then the problem that has been pointed out about IT has been, well, IT has silos. So you have the dev silo and ops silo and QA silo and PMO silo and all these silos, and they don't talk to each other. So IT is not doing that well because, well, silos. And with Agile and DevOps, there's lots of discussion about getting rid of silos. But the challenge is that it's not just on the technology side that in the organization that we have the silos, but we also have the silos in the rest of the organization. Because the departments don't really know about each other, what they do, what they want to achieve, what the mission is, really. If you ask the management what the mission is, they point you to their website, which has 3 lines of mission, which means nothing, right? All your organizations probably have a mission, which is probably published on the website. How does that mission help anyone to move forward? Is it specific enough to be helpful? Or is it something which could be randomly generated by a script? In most cases, it could be randomly generated. It says nothing, right? So you have a mission paper, but it doesn't actually mean anything. So the alignment is not there, both on the IT side, in the traditional enterprise, but also on the non-IT side. And then the way agreements are being made between the IT department and the rest of the business. So these guys there, they want something, and then they ask these guys here, can you deliver this? And these guys say, no, we can't. And then they say, well, you must. And it's like, we need more money. And they say, no, you can't get more money. We need more people. No, you can't get more people. Okay, we will do it. And then these guys here have to actually deliver this as well. But these guys here haven't really been involved to the extent that they have to. So when these guys deliver something in 2 years' time, these guys will be unhappy because it's not what they wanted, right? That's the enterprise IT for you. In the past, the focus has been on cost, so both on the business side and on the IT or technology side, how can we keep the costs as low as possible? But this has been changing. So it has been changing so that the business is more focused on the speed of things, but IT is still very often the role of having to think about costs, right? So do 20% more next year, but with 10% less budget, right, every year. And it doesn't work. And in the organizations very often, because the cost has been the key issue for IT for a long time, IT has been kind of relegated to this cost center role. Like IT is not there to help the organization, it's there as a cost center, and with most cost centers you can outsource this as well. And many organizations have tried that, they have tried outsourcing IT, some have succeeded, most of them have failed, depending on where and how they did it. So the changing role of IT from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. So in the past, but in many large organizations today, IT is in the role of the passive audit taker. So you get requirements from the business, and these requirements are then sent to the IT department then at one point responds with a solution. There is very little dialogue going on because you have already defined all the requirements beforehand. And to be fair, it's not unique, or this dynamic is not unique to the relationship between the business and IT, but also the business and its customer. Right? In the new world, the customer is brought much, much closer to the organization. And then the role of IT is becoming a central role, to be fair, the way it has always wanted to be, but it hasn't been able to. And in this new role, IT is moving from passive audit taker to the active business enabler. And if you have heard the phrase digital transformation, yes, right? So that's essentially about it. Of course, it is also about all the other things that the consultants want to sell you. So that's one good thing about digital transformation. It can mean whatever they want it to mean. So they can sell you whatever under this label. But the positive side of this is, if you have great ideas, which like if you work in an organization and you have great ideas, which you have had for a long time, but you haven't been able to get management support to invest in any of that. If you now say that it's about digital transformation, you're much more likely to get money for that. Or if you claim that, well, this is how we implement DevOps, you're also quite likely to get money for that. So you can trick your business to invest in good ideas. Some of the advice that has been given over the time with the changing role of IT, so this comes from Gartner, and I have a really interesting relationship with them. I dislike them with a passion. So at one point they came out with this bimodal concept. So it was related to agile development and agile in IT overall. So how can organizations deal with agile while having the legacy systems? Well, you should have two modes of IT. So you have the legacy systems in systems of record as mode 1, and then all the cool new things where you use agile development, where you use DevOps and stuff like this would be mode 2. So you would have the slow moving with the walking ones and the running ones. The best description of the bimodal IT, which I believe to be a really crappy idea, the best description I've heard about this was from Damon Edwards when he said, bimodal IT is a symptom, not a solution. So when you are working in an organization where you see something like bimodal IT working with two very, very separate groups with very different techniques and approaches, it's a symbol of a broken organization. It is not something to try for. So this was my mention of Gartner, so I feel good now. So with all these challenges, with the agile development, on the software side, it was easier. On the infrastructure side, not so much. So the question was, how can we make infrastructure fast as well? So then, roughly 11 years ago, more or less, the word DevOps was coined, and the DevOps movement started, and the DevOps philosophy started spreading around in organizations around the world. So this is one of the ways how we can describe DevOps. So this comes from IT Revolution, and they say, well, they have said in the past that DevOps is about these three things. So when we talk about DevOps, we talk about systems thinking. So we don't talk about just Dev or just Ops, we talk about the relationship between Dev and Ops, but we also recognize that we have the business there, we have the customers, so we look at the holistic picture. The second way is about amplifying feedback loops. So it's not just about sending information from development to operations, how it usually works, but it's also the other way around. So operations informs how applications are performing, and developers can learn from that. And the third way is the culture of continual experimentation and learning. So this is using agile methods to learn, to develop things further, and to improve things. So combining these three ways, if we do this, we do DevOps. Right? So this was one of the ways how to look at DevOps. The other way, which was described a little bit later, was named CALMS, right? Because the first one with the three ways, it's slightly obscure. So what does it mean? With CALMS, we talk about culture, automation, lean measurement, and sharing. So these are kind of the pillars for DevOps. It also comes from IT Revolution as a view. Is like when we talk about DevOps, we talk about the culture of support, the culture of collaboration. We talk about automation, especially in the testing area. We talk about lean. We talk about measurement, sharing measurements and learning from this. And we also talk about sharing and working together nicely and mentoring people and so on. So this is all nice. But it's quite difficult to understand what does it actually mean for the organization. So on the IT side, we have kind of figured out that, okay, so for the culture and collaboration, we need to make sure that development and operations work together, okay. But what else would we need to do, and how can we scale this in the organization? So this is my view of DevOps in terms of where it comes from. So DevOps is at the cross-section of three things, of Lean, Agile, and ITSM. So when you talk to people from the DevOps community, they are absolutely happy to recognize that, yes, some of the ideas might come from Lean. They're absolutely okay to acknowledge that, yes, some of the ideas do come from Agile as well. And then when you ask them, well, do you think you have learned anything from ITIL? They're like, no, ITIL is bad. ITIL doesn't work. But we have DevOps now, and DevOps solves all your problems by tomorrow. Yes, but actually there's a lot of stuff in the DevOps movement, in the DevOps practices that comes from IT service management and ITIL, but it's slightly rebranded, and it probably uses different words to describe the same stuff as well. So at the basic, if we remove the concept of DevOps, which is about collaboration and sharing and learning and respect and things like this, if we remove this from IT or from the domain of IT, it's about understanding that there are different viewpoints on things. And sometimes to become better in the organization, you need to understand other people's viewpoints. So it's not just about acknowledging that others have their own viewpoints on the same thing, but it's also sometimes trying to take the review on things, right? Which for the IT professionals, for various reasons, hasn't been the common thing to do in the past, right? So understanding that there's a customer with requirements, yes, but trying to put yourself in the shoes of that customer and thinking about how would they use the system, how would they use this improvement. This is not a very common thing in my experience and in the world's experience in IT. So this has been a challenge. So how do we actually kind of enable the collaboration in the organization? Patrick Debois, who is one of the godfathers of DevOps, when he wrote an article about what he believes DevOps to be, he thought that, well, DevOps is about optimizing for the whole, right? It uses the theory of constraints as one of the backbones of this. It realizes that we're dealing with the business, but also with the customer. It all fits together. And we have a collaboration between all the departments in the organization and the customer as well. So we collaborate with HR and finance department and sales and development and operations and the management itself and all the other teams. And it's a big happy family, and we understand what we're doing and we learn from each other. Partially because of the name, partially because it's easier to support by tool vendors, partially because we are lazy in IT. What happened was this, right? So the DevOps movement, because it talks about Dev and Ops, was then suddenly limited to Dev and Ops, right? And everybody else was kind of ignored. So we got something which I would call a local optimization. So many IT departments or many organizations with IT have been quite proud about doing DevOps, but they have ignored the philosophy of collaboration across the organization, and they have focused on a very small part of the organization, which is development and operations. They have forgotten every team before and after, and every team gets impacted by whatever this DevOps team is doing. So now we have this, right? So after we had DevOps, the next team to raise their hand with, what about us, was QA, or testing. Like, okay, so guys, have you noticed we are also here? Like, we should be testing some of these things. Okay, yes, we forgot about you. So let's call it Dev QA Ops now. Okay, so we have included you, and you should feel good. And then security guy was like, oh, guys, that you know that when auditors come, they have some questions sometimes, so maybe you should involve us as well. Okay, so let's have DevSecOps now. Yes. And then it has been going on for a few years now, and then for the past year or so, more or less, once we had the DevSec QA Ops to be very inclusive of everyone, but forgetting almost everyone else, then the DevOps community discovered that there is still one more team or part of the organization that they haven't really thought about to include in all the planning. So maybe they should be talking to the business as well, right? What a novel idea for the IT department to talk to the rest of the business to understand what they need. I wish ITIL had recommended this 25 years ago. So yes, so the good thing is that in the DevOps community, there is an understanding that DevOps, taken very literally, is a local optimization. So it's moving towards looking at the whole picture. But the problem is that the movement is discovering this only step by step by step by step. It's taking a long time. So those of you who have leveraged IT service management in the organization before, you probably already have an advantage over organizations who have started with DevOps and haven't done anything in IT service management. Because the way I see this in organizations, the moment they start growing and they need some kind of process in place to make sure that it's efficient and that they're not wasting money, or when their investors are interested in seeing black numbers instead of red numbers, so when these things happen, they start looking for guidance. Okay, so how can we make things more efficient? How can we improve? And then they start looking at the service mindset, they start looking at service management, but many of those organizations have no idea that the ITIL is out there. Or if they do, the only thing they know about ITIL is the CAB, because they used to be on the development side. And they were the ones who were dragged into the CAB meeting, which was not the advisory board, but the approval board in those organizations. So they were dragged into those meetings, kicking and screaming, and made to explain why this change needs to be done like this and now to a group of people who had no understanding how the change works, right? And then the ones who had designed the process called it ITIL. So it's kind of quite obvious that ITIL has a bad name in many organizations. So as it's moving towards the whole picture in the DevOps movement, they are looking more, the community is looking more at the service experience. It's not just the product experience, it's the service experience. So there's the part of the experience that comes before somebody signs up for the service, then the product itself in the middle, and then the post-purchase, the continual improvement and learning from the customer. So when you talk to organizations who are more advanced in using the DevOps practices, they are talking about service experience, they're talking about customer experience. And this is again something that if you know about IT service management, you know what they need, you know what they want to achieve, but they're speaking a slightly different language to you. So some of the principles and practices from the DevOps movement which are linked to Lean, Agile, and ITSM. So the question, how do we scale this? So how can you in your organization move the mindset or move the needle to the direction of having more collaboration? So how do you move away from DevOps being about only development and operations? How do you use collaboration in the rest of the organization as well? So first of all, when we talk about Lean, so Lean is based on Toyota Production System, and this is the first principle in TPS. Right? So base your management decisions on a long-term philosophy, even at the expense of short-term financial goals. Yet what do we see in most organizations nowadays, especially the big ones with lots of shareholders? We have quarterly planning, we have annual planning, we are focusing on very short-term objectives, right? So it's quite difficult to achieve many of the things that Lean really wants organizations to achieve if we don't set the direction right. So organizations struggling with this, and you probably have seen this yourself as well. Some decisions are being made in organizations just to make sure that someone can write a very nice line in their CV when they go looking for a new job somewhere else, leaving you to deal with a mess, right? So short-term thinking is very widespread in organizations, unfortunately. So this is something that needs to be addressed. But when we think about scaling DevOps, right? So DevOps is about collaboration. DevOps is not about tooling. DevOps is not about a process. DevOps is not about implementing DevOps or anything like this. DevOps is about the change in the approach to how work is done. And again, it's in many ways it's not new. DevOps, for sure, it was not invented by anyone, right? So the word was invented, but the principles have been around for a long time. And again, many of you who know IT service management recognize some of them. But to be successful in leveraging DevOps, the movement, the strength of the movement, to leverage this across the organization, you need to go back to the principles. It's not about the specific practices, which are quite technical in most cases, but it's about the principles on which DevOps has been built. So Lean is one of the collections of these principles where it's focusing on customer value, understanding the value stream, focusing on flow, not pushing work, but pulling work, and kind of striving for perfection, understanding that you will never achieve this. These principles, in some ways, are something that you probably have seen on consultants' decks for the past, 50 years? Right? But when you look at organizations, they're not actually doing this. So it's not about trying to implement the practices, it's about understanding that these principles are valid. So the Agile movement, the IT service management movement, the DevOps movement, they all come back to these principles. Or this is one of the sets of principles where they come back to. So focusing on customer value, setting customer first, right? Again, this is something that many organizations claim to be doing, but they're not really doing. Focusing on the value stream where you don't focus on local optimizations. These are like, on paper, they all look simple and logical, but yet most organizations ignore them completely. One of the tools that can be used in organizations to enable the DevOps mindset is this kind of an improvement program where you review the objectives of the organization with the rest of the organization rather than the management team figuring out, well, we need to achieve this. You guys now are responsible for actually delivering this. You figure out how to do this. So this is one of the techniques that can be used when it comes to management. Within teams, the Toyota improvement card size is a very, very valuable and kind of useful tool to use. So in your team, you need to improve. Improvement is more important than the work itself, to be fair. But how do you improve? So one way to improve is you set a very, very high goal, which probably most people know that you will never ever achieve. And then you start planning towards that. So you create a 3-year project plan as detailed as possible. And you try to follow that, and then you will fail every time. And then everybody who is involved is not satisfied because you have set them up for failure. The improvement card is slightly more realistic. So first of all, you don't need to set a very specific goal in the future, but you do set the direction. So we want to move towards that. We want to be as an organization or as a team more like this. You need to figure out where you are right now. You figure out what you can achieve for the next step, and then you PDCA toward the next condition. Value stream mapping is becoming a huge thing as well. So this is one of the things that helps the organization to really make the collaboration something that works, right? Large consultancies nowadays, the Big 4 or the Big 5, they're all pushing value stream mapping. There is not too much tooling available for this yet, so you can't see too many tool vendors selling you this as a solution. But value stream mapping is the next big thing. So when we come back to Agile, which now kind of has been accepted by management in many organizations as a thing to do, it's important to remember that Agile is not really about failing fast, it's about learning fast, right? So to be able to learn, sometimes you need to fail as well, because you don't always know when you can or cannot succeed. But very often Agile is described as, well, yes, it's about failing fast, so we need to fail fast. No, you don't need to fail fast, you need to learn fast. And to be able to learn fast, you sometimes need to be able to fail fast as well, rather than waste time and money. So the focus of Agile has already shifted in organizations to the wrong thing. But if you say that Agile is about failing fast, it gives people a very good way out, right? So it's like, okay, we don't need to do any planning. If we fail, it was because we were Agile, right? Agile is about failing fast, isn't it? So it's about taking no accountability in many cases and not actually helping the organization. So Agile is not saying that you shouldn't do any planning, because for many things you can plan. It's just saying that, well, you can't know everything, so with some things you need to experiment, and sometimes you will fail, and that's okay, and you learn from this. But you don't set yourself up for failure. Another thing that is quite useful to kind of help with collaboration, lots of teams, especially in IT, but elsewhere as well, if you talk to them, feel that they're too busy. They have too much work all the time. The question there is, they probably have conflicting priorities, right? And sometimes they're doing work that they should not be doing. So Kanban is one of the tools that can be used to visualize work and figure out where people are spending / wasting their time. And it can be used across IT, in development, in operations, in DevOps, but also across the organization itself, not just in IT. This is from the ITIL Practitioner book, which was published in 2016. So if you have ITIL or IT service management in an organization, and if you want to make it more agile, these are the principles that you should follow. And you will recognize some of them from Lean and some of them from Agile. At the same time, you could say that, well, if you want to leverage the DevOps movement and philosophy in your organization, you should be doing the same things, because it all comes back to the same principles. So these principles have been in ITIL for a long time, but they haven't been spelled out like this before. So for many people who have been working with ITIL in the past, this was like, wow, I thought that ITIL was about process. Like, no, it has never been about process. And then they claim that, okay, we have been doing ITIL for a long time, like for many, many years. Okay, so how does your CSI look like? What, CSI, what's that? Okay, so you're not actually using ITIL in that case. They will have a presentation about this later today. So there are various thinking tools available nowadays which help you to figure out the context you're in and choose the right tools and techniques to use. This is the Cynefin framework, which is invented by Dave and his collaborators. So the session later today will go into more depth about Cynefin and how it can be used in also introducing the DevOps mindset in organization. And then I wanted to show you this slide as well, because digital transformation, as I mentioned before, it's one of the things that kind of can bring you funding if you need. You will get the slides. We will get the slides later on, so I'm not going to kind of stop on each of these topics separately. But for me, the point of digital transformation is to figure out how to leverage technology to help organizations succeed. It's that simple, and we have been doing this for many years already. But we're kind of stuck because we're sometimes stuck in the old ways. And one of the old ways that we're stuck in is we're trying to apply the same methods and tools for everything, right? And part of the learning in digital transformation is to understand that you can't really use the same tools and techniques for everything. So this is where Kevin comes to help as well, and they will talk about this. So the organizational benefits, this is one of the things how you can sell DevOps as an approach to the organization. So I'd rather not stop too long on this one. But some of the practical things that you can do to become better at the 3 ways. So across the whole organization, if you want to embrace the DevOps mindset, what are the things that you can do, or what are the things that you should be doing? Bringing pain forward is related mostly to technology. This is an example of this is if something fails with the IT system at 3 a.m. in the morning, it's not just the operations professional that get a call, it's also the developers. So you build it, you run it, rather than throw it over the wall for someone else to take care of. Using shared objectives, so rather than having separate objectives for dev and ops, put them together and make them responsible for delivering value to the customer. In that way, you can very easily align the objectives between the teams. Optimizing for the whole rather than local optimization. Minimizing handoffs. Again, in IT, we talk about, so well, we have the customer on one hand, and then we get the architects, and then the PMO, and then the development, and then the QA, and then the operations, and then the support team. So rather than having handoffs between all these teams, see if you can maybe merge some of those teams into one so that you don't have the handoffs, because handoffs always introduce more complexity and information gets lost. Dismantling silos is not about removing departments, but making sure that teams work together rather than working in isolation. So that's the key there. It's quite important to separate projects from products. So this is a longer topic overall, but for many years, organizations have used project management methods to manage product development. So if you use Prince2 for product development, you will fail, right? Because it's not meant for that. Projects have an end, so they have a beginning and an end, whereas product development has a beginning, but it doesn't really have an end, right? So the approach to these two is very, very different. And if you use project management, which is meant for something that has a beginning and an end, for something that doesn't have an end, you can't do that. You can try, but you will fail. And then the difficult part is the transparency and trust and respect. So this is kind of organizations or management kind of realizing that people are not there to be bad, but people are there to do the best job that they can, right? And then sometimes you should, like this morning you heard, sometimes to listen to or to hear the truth, you really need to go and talk to the people who are closest to the job. So to finish off, as a pointer, you will probably be noticing this in the next few years. So the DevOps movement with serverless computing and all this is starting to morph into something that combines the finance management as well. So IT and financial management are now coming together, and this will create a big change in the way organizations are doing budgeting and accounting for IT. So this is something to keep an eye open to. And thank you. If you want to read more about how I feel about things and who I dislike this week, you can follow me on Twitter. You can also feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you want to ask me any questions. And then sometimes I write longer articles about project management, service management, and DevOps on Medium as well. Thank you.